Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will give you the basic introduction about the C++ language, and I will show you why we need C++ and why they have created the C++ language. And actually, I'm going to start the whole series about the C++ language. In this series, I will teach you from the very beginner level to the very advanced level of C++. And I will make this series on chapter basis, and in the end of each chapter, I will give you some projects based on real life examples. In this way, you will be able to test your concepts of C++, and also you will be able to apply these concepts on real world problems. So if you want to join me on this series, you can subscribe my channel and also press the bell icon to get the updates of the new uploads on this series. Now we will move towards my computer screen and I will give you the basic introduction of C++. So I will begin with our first chapter, C++ introduction, and I will show you why they have created the C++. Before the advent of the C++, there are some old languages which are also known as procedural languages. The example of these languages are C and Fortran. And what are the problem with these kind of languages? The first problem is unrestricted access. And what does it mean? We will look into the example. Here for example, we have two functions, function A and function B, and this is enclosed in some block, and we assign the task to function A to perform the addition and similarly function B to perform the subtraction. And next we have created some local variables, for example in this block A and B, and we have assigned value of 3 to A and value of 1 to B, and when we pass these local variables to this function, it will perform addition. And similarly in another block we have created again some local variables with the name of A and B, and we have assigned again some values to these variables, and when we pass these variables to this subtraction function, it will give us answer 2. And now these local variables are only accessible by this block. So we have function A in this block. These local variables are only accessible by this function. Only this function be able to process these variables or modify these variables, or it can be only visible to this function, and similarly goes for this block. But instead of creating these variables for these two blocks two times, we can create also the global variables. So the concept of the global variables is this: it can be accessible by any function. It can be accessible by your function A, by your function B, and if someone else, some other person has created function C, it can also be able to access these variables. So what are the problem with these variables? We don't have any restricted access. Anyone can have the access to these variables and they can easily modify these variables. For example, now we have created the global variables with the value of A3 and B1. Now if I will process these variables here, and for example I will again create the new variable A, and now I will assign it value 4. So what will happen? It will also modify the value of the global variable here. It will become 4 next. So when we perform the task of subtraction after the addition, so now A will be 4 instead of 3. So this is the problem with the global variables. Anyone can have the access to these variables and anyone can modify or corrupt these values. The next problem with these kind of languages, they are difficult to modify. And for example, if you have a very complex program where you have a lot of data and lot of functions, so as you can see that each function is accessing data from each data block, and as you can see that here each function is accessing the data from each block. So it is very difficult for someone to understand this program and to modify this. That's why it is also difficult to conceptualize. If you want to explain someone else what are you doing in your program, so it's very difficult to explain. And if you want to give your program to someone else to modify, so for him it's very difficult to modify and to understand your program. So these are the problem with these procedural languages. That's why they have created a new language which is also known as object-oriented programming, and we call this language is C++. It is the extension of C, that's why its name is C++. So it solves the problems of the unrestricted access, so it will give the restricted access. How it will give the restricted access? So in this concept, they have the block and each block has its own data and own member function, and you can communicate between these blocks through the assigned objects. So this is the concept of the C++, and it will communicate through different blocks through the objects. That's why it's called also object-oriented programming. And also because of its simple structure, it is easy to modify and easy to conceptualize and understandable. Now we will look into some example. For example, if you are some organization and you have your own sales department, personnel department, and finance department, and each department is responsible for its own data. For example, finance department is responsible for the financial data, and personnel department is responsible for the personal data, and sales department is responsible for the sale data. Now these data are also secure. Someone from the finance department cannot have access the data to the sales department. The only way to access the data in between these departments by the assigned objects or by the assigned persons. That's why we have to create object, and this object will call its member functions, and through its members we can access the data. That's why it's called the object oriented programming, and now it's very easy to conceptualize and it has a very simple structure as compared to C. And with the concept of the object, it will also enable the concept of the inheritance. What is inheritance? In inheritance, for example, you have some base class, your main building, and then you can create other child classes which are also known as derived classes. And now I will give you the example of the inheritance. For example, you have made the class name car, and for example there are some similar features that all car has, for example 4 wheels and 1 steering. But for example, now also we have different type of cars. For example, Tesla, they are derived from this base class because it also shared the same features like 4 wheels and steering, but Tesla also has its own features. For example, it runs on electric signals, and it some has auto driving system, and similarly Mercedes has some of its own unique features, and Audi some of its own unique features. But all these 3 cars have some unique features like 4 wheels and steering. So, and this is the concept. For example, if you build some program and in the initial stage you have some features and you sell this program to some other company, so instead of changing your class, they will add more classes, and they will derive these classes from your base classes, and they will add more features in your program. And what else this object oriented programming give us? You can create your own custom variable type. For example, here you have created the class car. Now the car is the new data type, and here Tesla is a new data type, Mercedes is a new data type, Audi is a new data type. And here, for example, if you create a class of position is a new data type, and similarly if I create a class of robotics, so robotics is a new data type. In this way you can create your own custom variables apart from the inbuilt variables in the C++ programming. And other concept is the polymorphism and overloading. And what is overloading? For example, you have created your own custom variables, for example position, and you have 2 variables A and B, and the type of these variables is position. And what will it will do? For example, you have the plus sign, you want to add these 2 positions A plus B equal to, and what does plus mean and what does equal mean? For example, if I create the variable with the type of robotics, if I perform some action A plus B, so what is the plus mean in this? What should be the A plus B of robotics? So that's why we have to overload. We have to define the functionality of plus sign again, for example, and that's why in this class we will create some also member function, and we will overload this plus sign. What will the plus sign do? If we'll pass this over new data type. This is called operator overloading, and overloading is a one type of concept of polymorphism. What is polymorphism? In polymorphism we can create like overloading operators, or we can create some functions, but the functions behaves in a different way based on what they are operating on. For example, we have created some function sound, yes, and now you can create the object cat and dog. If you use this function with the cat, so it will make the cat sound, and if you use the same function with the dog, it will make the dog sound. So what does it mean? Function behaves it in a different way based on what they are operating on. In this, they are operating on a cat object, so this sound function will perform different, and in case of the dog object, the same function will give us the sound of the dog. So this is the concept of the polymorphism, and here we will see the similarities in between C and C++, and it is clear from the picture that C++ is the superset of C and C is the subset of the C++. Almost every statement we write in C, it is true in the C++ language, but it's not the other way around. And there are some features that are common to C++, and there are other useful features, and there are only features that only works in C++, not in C. So this is the basic of C++, and it will also show why they have created the C++ language and why they have extended the scope of the C language and they have extended it to the C++ language, and they introduced the idea of the object, and that's why it's called object-oriented programming. So in the next lecture we will download and set our compiler to build our programs, and we will create our first basic program, and next we will understand how the compiler execute this program and how it process this program, and next we will break down our program into smaller chunks and we will give the explanation of each word we have write in our program. So this is it for today. See you next time. Bye bye.